Alright, today we're going to be making a customizable plot specifically for like tycoon games or whatnot. Okay, let's get started. So first I wanted to make a giant part like this. This is 200 by 200. And under this part, I want you to somewhere store the size of this part, which is 200 by 200. I stored it under an attribute to make an attribute. Make the plus sign, name it, put vector 2. Vector 2s are, they just store two numbers. That's all you need to know. We exit that. We open this. Make a folder on here called editable or any name that you want, and we're going to be using this folder to put in values with the players that we want to have permission to edit with. And the reason why I'm using a folder instead of, let's say, an attribute is because it's a lot easier to store a list of objects than using the attribute section right here. So I put this at an angle of the base plate because I want to make this as customizable as possible. So if you want to, at an angle, I'll show you how we can solve all the problems in making an angled customizable plot, and even advanced buildings that have that aren't always like rectangles or squares and whatnot. Alright, here I have a Google art of how I'm gonna solve all these problems. So for placing down our objects, we're gonna select an object from wherever we store it. It's going to be in a model. Let's just say this is the model and it has our building model inside of this. So we're going to be using our mouse to drag this model in, and how we're going to check if it's within the buildable plot is by these four corners. You can place these points anywhere, but these points, they have to be placed within the territory or you cannot place down this part. So if I try to place my building here, it won't be valid because this corner and this corner are outside of the spot. However, here it would work fine. And the next problem you're probably thinking about that's hard is if the territory is angled, how do we accommodate for that? And I'll show you how. I'll show you how we're gonna solve this. So world positions, vectors, C-frames, all of them are based off the world position, and there are invisible accesses that determine the position of our or of any object to be particular. So as you see here, x10 really is just 10 distance of 10 along the red axis. The way we're gonna solve this is, what if we could move something based off a different axes? And when I mean a different axis, of course, I'm meaning the plot axes. Now with this new axis, whatever you call it, if we move 10 along the x-axis, it will move 10 along this new axis that we created. That is how we're going to calculate corner is within a placeable plot or not, using this concept object space. Alright, now I'm going to set up our first placeable object, which I call this the lava stone dropper. I know it looks pretty nice for something so simple. Alright, so first you want to make a part, and this part is going to be our collision. So I'm just going to name it collision real quick. And then you want to put your part on top of this and resize it however you want. I resized this before so I started recording. And it's good. This is the amount of space that this particular model will take up. The model or the appearance of it itself will not take up space on our plot. This object will. So this will be invisible. And what you want to do is create a bunch of attachments on this object. Alright, now the next thing about part of our setup is to make a build menu, and for this tutorial I'm only making a single button for a build menu. So insert screen UI, put in an image button, and I'm going to use this cool little feature called the viewport frame, and I'll show you what it does. So first you gotta put it in, and then I'm going to put the image of our dropper into the viewport frame. So I'm going to position my camera in a good nice angle. Alright, now next you want to make a camera object. And then using this camera object here, this is the camera that is functioning in workspace. It will replicate every what's called a property that your camera is in. So you put that here, position it nice, and then copy the C frame of this camera and put it in here. And it's really important you don't move your camera here, or else it's going to be inconsistent with what you want. So now we have an invisible floating camera object that's facing toward this thing. Now the next thing you want to do is select your model, copy it, and then paste it into our viewport frame. Next, to the last step is find this property called current camera and then place it into the camera. And now you have the image of the dropper inside of a GUI. How this works, I mean, there's one thing that's kind of confusing. If you put only models that are under the viewport frame will actually show. I think there's a property that allows you to change that, but this is how I set it up. Alright, we need to do one last setup. Put in server storage. We want to have a way to store all of our placeables so we can replicate it over to our server. So we copy this, and then we paste it into our folder. I mean, in a more complex game, you want to organize it better, but for the sake of this video, we're only gonna have one folder. Now, let's start off with creating the local script first, and I'm gonna do a time lapse of my scripting, like my recent video. So let's begin. Alright, now I think this is a good time to explain what I have written so far. So I have these two functions right here. The first one is to check all the attachments to see if they're within bounds. And the second one is basically what starts our entire chain. So the first thing I did was I got a building and cloned it. And that's what you saw in the testing when I was moving my mouse around. I wanted to make like that highlight thing that looked pretty cool. And it's really important that you clone the model and put it into workspace to make it visible. And since this is a local script, only the player who does the action will see it. And then we of course get the collision, get the color, and then I have this event right here. Every time the mouse moves, I would move the building to the mouse's position that is on the on the workspace. And there's a bug that you saw probably. I'll show you how to fix it. I just thought of a solution. That's why I decided to stop and explain here. And now here we have, if the box is inbound, it will change to a greenish color. If not, it will change to a reddish color. Alright, hold on guys, I made a couple of mistakes after double checking my work. So number one, don't return true after checking the first attachment. It needs to be outside of the loop after it iterates through all the attachments. Second thing is I flipped it into cloudy signs. Whoops. we only want it to return false if the x or y is bigger than 100. Next, this part right here needs to be z, because C frame positions, the horizontal axes are, or the ones flat on the ground, are x and y and z. Y is the up and down. And finally, this needs to be an or, because if x is like bigger than 100, but y isn't, then then the and statement will make the statement false. Therefore, it will ignore the return false. And after I test this, it should work properly. There we go. And then when it's tested out, it fits perfectly in. Alright, so I have to quickly explain how the checking territory thing works. Gets the point, checks the z distance from the center, checks the x distance from the center, and because of the object spacing, it fixes the orientation too. If it's outside of the territory, it's considered outside, and that's tracked by if the distance is greater than a certain number, in this case 100, because 100 from the center should be outside of the blue box because that's the size of our territory. Alright, I'm gonna explain why there was that bug. Whenever I move around my mouse, the dropper just kept like zooming into my face. So let's say I put my mouse here, after I press it, then the dropper visual will appear right here, right? But as soon as it appears, the mouse will collide with the dropper and then move the mouse position here. And then once that occurs, the event that tracks the mouse movement will always update this thing over and over again. So it brings it closer to my face, and then the mouse again is cut off by the model, which is the reason why that zoom in bug occurs. You can solve this by making the mouse ignore the model, which luckily in Studio there's a really easy way to do that. There's this property called mouse dot let me put that here. Mouse dot target filter. And we just put in our building, and that should fix the issue. There we go. And since this is out of bounds, it is red, and it works. Now we got out of rotating stuff and snapping. Alright, time to quickly explain what I did. So I added input service, and then I have a function that registers the input while in placing mode, which is a new variable I made. If you press X, it will destroy the building that's being traced on your little cursor. Disconnect the event to prevent memory leaks, and then reset the variable here, and then disable placing mode false. And of course, I had to change the local scope of these variables so I could edit it outside the function. And over here we have the rotate thing, and I'll quickly explain what this is. This is to prevent the model when you're in preview mode. When you move it around, it will always set the rotation of the model to the rotation of the object that you're hovering above because of how I wrote the script, which takes the position and the rotation of the object below it. So I had to add this little part, which takes the rotated angle and this variable called rotate, which increments by 1 every time I press R to track the amount of rotations I did to keep it consistent. Now on to creating snapping. So first, it's going to be an if-else statement. When you press Y, it will run a different set of lines instead of the one that we had to do the 3-step process. It will be really similar though. So first, when we get our position, our mouse position, and whatever rotations we have, we get our object space of that location. Object space. So instead of calculating the distance of these axes, the world axis, we calculate from these axes. Now, and then in order to make it snap, all we have to do is round down a certain amount of numbers in order to achieve our little goal. So let's say we're snapping to 1 stud, and in object space, it is like 22.4 along the red axis. It will round it down to 2, adjust it, and then we set it back to the world position so we can place it properly into the world. This is probably the most confusing concept in my opinion, so I don't blame you if you don't understand, but we'll get straight into the code. Now I'm gonna code in the property checker with the mouse and stuff. Okay, let's go. Now we got set up for our server script so we can actually place down the part for everyone else to see. And I'll just start by making a server script in here and by putting in, okay, these are from previous videos, and adding a new remote event, and I'm gonna call this the place down event. And that should be it for setup. Now we're gonna add our last bit of local script for this project. I forgot to add a collision detector for other buildings. So first you want to put the collision tag into the collision object, or every single one for that matter. How this script works is I'm gonna be using the get parts and parts method, which returns an array of every part that is currently touching or inside of my part, in this case the collision part of this particular dropper, and then it will check for any other collision parts via the collision tag. We're gonna move on to the server script now. We're gonna name this the place down global script. And this is the script that will take in all the signals from all the local scripts and place down the objects as we're given the C frame, the player who owns the object. And we should also activate the object too, so it actually functions. Before I make that script first, however, I'm gonna make a quick dropper script that will actually function. Now it's time to actually work on the main server script. Now that we begin the local side script, or the server side script, my bad. We gotta first get the signal from the local script, which we get from getting a remote event, and then I check back to the local script to make sure all the arguments are correct. And as you can see right here, I am making adjustments to the local side arguments I'm sending from local script to server script because I screwed up a lot. And now for the server script itself, I clone a building from our server storage. And then I parent it to workspace. I set the C frame, activate the dropper script inside of it. You should probably put an if statement to make in case you're placing down a cosmetic object and it doesn't have a script. Thus, it will result in an error if you try to activate a non-existent script. And the final thing is I made a pretty big mistake here where I put a player argument first when local scripts already provide a player argument passed to the server script by default. That's why I spent so much time changing that. A few changes before we create an edit mode for our script. We need to first remove this part, since in the case of having multiple objects or multiple buildings, we don't want to keep looking under the same image button and viewport frame. We want to add a new folder where we store all of our placeable objects that we can use to clone to make our preview mode. That's step number one. And then I have to clean up the rest of the script to make our edit mode. And our edit mode will just be reusing mostly our same script over and over again. So it should be really simple. So I did this off screen, but I put an argument here. When you get our place down selected, it activates our preview mode, which we want to know which building that we're previewing. So we have our we changed this to find first child of the build name, and it's important you memorize all the build names of our thing. So now that we've done this being clicked does not send the argument, so we have to change to a function, and then we run the method here. We call it the function, and then we put down the name lava stone dropper, which is the name of my placeable here. Another change to adjust for the future change is we want to have both the server and local access the same placeable folders. We don't need the one in server storage anymore, which I already deleted. So we are going to change that. And the reason we're doing this is so that if we make a change, we only need to make a change to one folder and it to accommodate that. Because like if I change something in this folder, but the other folders but server storage is being used by the server script, then I have to change both, which is really inconvenient. Also, I forgot to move the script in here, and that will make it easier to edit our script from now on. Or now it's time to make our edit button, which I'll do really quickly. To a bit of setup, rename the text button to edit button, and I want to add a new tag to all collisions to identify them through script, because there's a nice little thing called collection server, which allows you to get all parts or instances of a certain tag, which we use for script. Last but not least, we need to add a delete mode, which if edit mode is active and placing mode is active, meaning you're selected something from edit mode, you can just erase it from existence. And finally, we need to send everything to the server so that it could pick up on that. And I created a delete event already over here. And I think I have the thing. No, I created the delete remote event already. So we're just going to work off that. And it's going to send a signal to the server, which will delete whatever object that we send over. Last but not least, we need to add a condition which checks for player ownership, which we have nicely set up with the set attribute thing, where all we have to do is check the attribute of the model of the object, which in this case is the parent of the collision part that is selected here, and we just have to make it equal our player's name, because when you get the attribute which is labeled owner, it should return our player's name because that's what we put under it. And I'm gonna also put the condition in the edit mode thing, so other players' things don't turn blue too. Now to recap, or to make sure everything in the workspace is here, or our thing. So 2 events, place down event, delete event, of placeables folder and replicated storage that you store all your buildables in, a screen GUI that contains your local script, in the image button of your building. So you can make multiple as long as your script connected to that button, an edit button, and inside of the image script, there's this design. This isn't needed for the script to run. And of course, the server script side. And each building should be under one model with a script or no script, but then you have to check if it exists, or this line will stop your script from working. The model of the building itself, and a collision block to check for hitboxes and make sure it has all these attachments in them. This thing should look like anchored. I don't think it's supposed to have can collide. That's what was throwing me around earlier. Everything inside of here should be collidable, but you can turn it off and then turn it back on when you actually place it. All of that's check, and I tested mostly for bugs. And let me just recap everything I did. So I added edit mode, obviously. Edit mode works by changing a boolean on, which activates the edit mode keybinds, and these keybinds allow you to click on a blue edit object, which is checked by having the collision tag, and if the owner is there, and then it does this. I have reused this script because it basically does everything that I need to like edit something. And when you're placing and editing something, I'm basically reusing the same script to pull that off. This is to prevent a bug where if you cancel an edit mode and you don't save the previous like position when you were editing it, it would just void it. That's why I called it anti-void, and that's why I put it everywhere. And I put this here. If you actually do place it, then you have to get rid of the anti-void, because I only created an anti-void for the local side. That means on the server end, nothing actually happens to the thing you're editing until it fires to the server. That's why there was that instance where an invisible dropper was working on the local side, because on the server side, it's still replicating an object. That's why I put this here to prevent duplication. And yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, and of course this part, you gotta check for ownership. If all of these things are passed, then the collision will turn semi-transparent and blue. Here it undoes it. I put the reset stuff all into the same function, so I could just replicate it wherever I needed to. I reset at the end of placing because there's some bugs that I realized, and I didn't want to redo the entire code just to fix that bug. And yeah, it's just really easy to just put a reset button to reset my script back to 0, all the like mode variables back to 0. And that should be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. This is a pretty complicated. I did not have too much like in-depth explanation of each code, because this in itself is complicated enough where you wouldn't need those deep explanations of very basic stuff. But at the beginning I had it there because, you know, I want to make the beginning look a little more high effort. But at this point it's like really hard to like make a drawing or a diagram to help explain it. It's just like a sense of like logic flow, a flow chart of how things work. Now, it is level 4, so I expect you to at least know how to code already. Alright, that's the end of the video. Bye bye.